Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from London on a sunny autumnal afternoon. My name is Tom Nixon, and I'm the head of the MA in Art History at the Courtauld, and I'm going to be leading this virtual open day today, um, together with my colleague Taka from our admissions department, and also one of our students, Aishu, who's going to be joining us later, having popped out from one of her seminars. Um, Welcome to this session, which I hope will provide you a kind of with a broad overview of what it's like to study the MA in History of Art at the Courtauld. And I say I'm the head of the MA program here, but I'm also a teacher on one of these special options. I specialize in medieval art and architecture in Spain and England, but I'm speaking to you today in my role as head of the MA. So some of you may know the Courtauld well, others perhaps not so well, but I think that what marks out the Courtauld as a place for study is, first of all, our size as a centre of art history with the largest department in the UK and one of the largest centres for art history anywhere in the world. And our MA program is also extremely large. We have around 230 students each year. That means that it's big enough, I think, that you get a strong sense of community and of being surrounded by a vibrant group of students who are all committed to art history. But it's still small enough that you get to know a lot of people around you um, and make lasting friendships as well. Um, we have a faculty of about 36, and we cover through our research a wide range of materials from the Middle Ages to the present and across the globe. And as a student thinking about applying to the Courtauld MA in History of Art, I would say that one of the things that makes the Courtauld's MA program distinctive is the fact that we're in London with access to a really unrivaled variety of museum and library collections, whether that's the British Museum, the V&A, Tate, the British Library, and so forth. But also we have access to monuments and sites within the UK and beyond. So, for instance, a lot of my colleagues at the moment are in Paris with their MA students. I'm taking Aishu, who's just joined us, and other students on my Spanish MA to Madrid and Toledo next week. And so I think being in London means that we are connected and have access to a very wide range of sites and resources. And the other distinctive nature of aspect of the Courtauld MA is its focused and specialized nature, and I'll be talking about that a little later. Um, so the Courtauld is perhaps best known for its gallery. We have one of the great collections of arts in the Middle Ages to the present day. That's on our Somerset House site. But we also have a large collection of objects that are not on display, but that are often used in teaching, depending on the kinds of courses that you select. So this relationship with the gallery and with other museums and collections is very important to us and to our teaching on the MA and across our programs at the Courtauld. And one of the things that we really value and that we hope we can offer to students is the opportunity to really engage firsthand with artworks and objects. It's one thing to see them on a screen, but to see them in person is really one of the most exciting parts of the experience as a student. So I want to just outline something of the structure of the MA in History of Art at the Courtauld, which we can think about as a combination of a talk component and research, all of which culminate in the dissertation, which is the major piece of work that you submit at the end of the MA. The MA in History of Art is one program, and it has a set of kind of common elements. Those include 4 summative assessments. That's to say that your final degree mark comes from 4 different assessments. But we also have across the MA, everyone has the opportunity to try out some writing in the form of 3 formative assessments, so where you get feedback on your work, and perhaps if you've not written an essay for a while, gives you an opportunity to get a bit of practice before you write those summative assessments. There's also strong guidance when it comes to essay writing and other forms of assessment. So our small group teaching and the very kind of close relationship you form with your special options teacher really comes to the fore in the one-to-one tutorials that we offer all our students in preparation for their assessments. And then with our special options, we have 22 classes that sit across the autumn and spring semesters, and that really provide, I think, an unparalleled opportunity to dive deep into a particular theme or moment in history or issue, and explore it with someone who's really a specialist in the field, publishing in the field, and who knows the literature and the materials like no one else. Those classes take a number of different forms. Sometimes they are take the form of kind of informal seminars with discussions and maybe presentations. Sometimes they take the form of lectures with an opportunity to ask questions and have further discussion. Or they may include trips to collections in London at the Courtauld Gallery or beyond. And I should say, incidentally, so I've forgot at the very beginning of this session, that I'm going to talk about the next 20 minutes or so about the MA programme in general. Then Taka's going to talk a little bit about the admissions process, and then Aishu, who has joined us, is going to give you a kind of a student's perspective on the MA before we have a bit of time, hopefully about 15 minutes at the end for questions. But if you do have questions in the meantime, do pop them into the chat and we can look over those and try to answer them as we go along. So back to the MA in History of Art. If you look at our web pages, you'll find a very wide range of different special options taught by members of our faculty that range from the Middle Ages to the present day. So you can see here a variety of our options really focused on medieval, Renaissance and early modern topics and issues from across the world. We have a cluster of special options that focus on 19th and early 20th century materials. And we have another cluster that are really looking at art and thinking about art since World War II. And I really encourage you to have a good look through our web pages. If you click on any of these special options pages, you can find further information about the kinds of material that they cover, the kind of tips that in most cases are offered as part of those special options. And you can get a sense of the course leaders as well. So those are our special options. And as I said, one element of teaching that we prioritize at all levels at the Courtauld is the opportunity to engage with art objects in person as much as possible. Of course, that varies. One's capacity to do that varies depending on the kinds of materials you're studying. I teach an MA in medieval England, and we have a huge number of monuments on our doorsteps that we can easily go and visit. For my the MA special option, I teach in medieval Spain. We have a more restricted number of objects available in local museums and galleries, but then we also take the opportunity to go to Spain and see some of the buildings and objects that we study at first hand. In fact, you can see bottom left here some of my students on a previous year on a visit to the great mosque of Cordoba in Spain. So alongside our most focused special option teaching, we also have what we call shared interest teaching, which brings together the small groups, typically of between 6 and 12 students that we teach on the special options uh, in order to think collectively about issues of shared interest for people working on particular periods. So, for example, we have 4 or 5 special options that focus on medieval art and architecture. And in these shared interest classes that take place across the autumn and spring semesters, we bring that cohort of students together to think about issues of common concern to people working on the Middle Ages. And we have something rather similar for our Renaissance special options, for the early modern special options, and also for those dealing with modern and contemporary art. So one of the things that we try and do with the MA at the Courtauld is give you a combination of breadth and depth. Depth that comes from the special option and from the kind of small group teaching, a kind of middle ground that comes from the shared interest teaching, where you're thinking about your the period more broadly and the issues pertinent to it. And then at the broadest level, we have our methodologies in conversation sessions, which are sessions that bring together the whole MA cohort, typically, as I said, about 230 students, to think about current issues in the discipline of art history. And so this is, again, an opportunity to meet students from outside of your special option or from outside your the particular period that you're studying, but also to hear from other perspectives and other members of faculty on what they consider to be live issues for the discipline of art history. And this is a course that we've thought about quite carefully because we're conscious that many people who've done art history before at a BA level, and I would say that that's probably about 40 to 50% of our MA intake have done BA in art history before. We have a lot of other students who are coming to us from typically from other humanities backgrounds. But those who have done a BA in art history before often have studied some kind of methodological or course looking at kind of different frameworks and theories of art history. What we try to do with our methodologies in conversation is do something a little bit different from that. And instead, we pair members of faculty, often working on very different materials, but to approach similar problems that they're engaging with in their current research, and therefore offer different perspectives on current issues for the field of art history, but approaching those from multiple perspectives. It's an opportunity for them and for you as students to think outside of the particular focus of your special option and think more broadly about how what you're studying and what you're researching fits into the broader discipline. And that, again, I think that speaks to this desire that we have to give you opportunities to think both in a very focused, in-depth way, but also to think more broadly about art history and to meet your fellow students. And that's something where the size of the Courtauld, which is still relatively small compared to most other humanities departments, really means that we can give you that breadth in a way that's difficult to do in small departments. So this pie chart gives you a sense of the academic year, but also of the way that it's assessed. So it's assessed through a combination of essays. My students submitted their first assessed essays a couple of weeks ago. That represents 15% of the overall degree mark. They'll submit their next assessed essays early in the new year. Then we have the virtual exhibition exercise, which I'll talk about. And then from March onwards, until they submit it in May, students are working on their dissertations, which I will talk about a little bit later. But I wanted to briefly outline what perhaps is the most unusual element of our MA and perhaps the least familiar to anyone who's done a humanities subject before, which is the virtual exhibition. So our essays in our dissertation, in some respects, follow a relatively traditional format that will be familiar to many of you, but the virtual exhibition invites you instead to think about different ways of presenting an argument, and particularly the way that through an exhibition, through exhibition design, you can create a kind of visual argument. The MA in art history at the Courtauld is not a course on curating that requires a set of different skills and teaching. But it is true, nonetheless, that many of the special options engage with questions of curating and display because of the way that we visit exhibitions and rely on the kind of research that's undertaken because of them. And we have a very close relationship with museums and collections in London and beyond, not least at the Courtauld Gallery. And the virtual exhibition invites students to think about a virtual exhibition, a kind of an ideal exhibition, as it were, that they design, they conceive of the subject of that exhibition, they think about the collection of objects, up to 30 objects they would like to display, and students write a proposal for that, a kind of, if you like, a pitch explaining why they think that exhibition would be important and valuable, what it brings that's new to the field, where it would be located in an ideal world, and how it will be structured. So would it have different rooms with different kind of sub themes and so on. And then they also write a sample label, so a kind of a short text accompanying one of their objects, a sample wall panel, the kind of text that you might find when you go into a new room in a temporary exhibition, and a catalogue entry. So a more scholarly piece of work, such as you might find in the catalogue for an exhibition that focuses on one of the objects in that exhibition. And we hope through this exercise to encourage you to think about different ways of writing. How is it, what kind of challenges do you face when writing a label for an exhibition, for example, where you have to avoid technical jargon and you have to convey in a very succinct and economic fashion key information about your object? Or what would you write in a wall panel? How would you explain, again, in a concise fashion, the kind of broader concept behind the organization of objects in a room? So these are opportunities to think about different registers, different ways of writing art history, and they often lead to some of our most inventive and creative pieces of work that our students do. It's a kind of a challenge that many of our students really rise to, I think, because it's slightly different from the kinds of essays that they might have written before. And it's also something that many of our students use as a kind of stepping stone for careers into museums or other heritage organizations, that they can show that they have this experience of thinking about curatorial questions and the display and presentation of materials. The culmination of the MA at the Courtauld is the dissertation. That's a 10,000 word piece of work. That's approximately the length of a kind of academic article, and that's why we choose that length. And this, we hope, builds on all the skills and knowledge that you've acquired through the talk component of the MA, but also gives you the opportunity to explore materials or questions that are particularly interesting to you. In many ways, through the kind of structure of assessed essays and the virtual exhibition and the dissertation, we hope that you have an opportunity to, within the kind of broader field that relates to your special option, to explore particular aspects or facets of that material that really interest you. And certainly it's the case that the best dissertations are written by those who are most fascinated by the materials and kind of most obsessive in some ways when it comes to researching and writing those. So the dissertation is written over the course of the spring and summer. It's submitted in May. It's an independently written piece of work, but you receive, as you do with your other assessments, a fair level of guidance on that. So you will have a kind of a class discussion where possible dissertation topics are discussed. Those topics generally come from students, although if they're struggling to think of things, your special options tutor might suggest some materials that they know to be to have kind of good potential. And then as you work on that material, you receive 3 tutorials from a special options tutor in which they meet with you on a one-to-one basis, discuss your ideas with you, suggest materials that you might want to research, perhaps give you advice about accessing libraries or archives or museums, um, and read a draft of that dissertation as well in order to give you that kind of final level of guidance. And our dissertations, again, I would say, are some of the most exciting pieces of work that we get to read as teachers because they're they often represent original research. In several cases, they've gone on to form the basis of PhD research or further research or published articles, um, and give you an opportunity beyond the framework of the kind of regular preparation that you might be doing for seminars and lectures to really investigate a particular issue in depth and to make use of the really first class libraries and resources that we have both at the Courtauld and in London more broadly at institutes like the British Library, the Warburg Institute, the Tate, and so on. So alongside the kind of if you like, kind of more formal component of the MA, there are also a number of opportunities available to you as students at the Courtauld, which can really kind of enrich that teaching experience. One aspect of that are the lectures that are offered as part of our teaching program more broadly. They include, for example, our foundation series, which are a regular series of lectures that run through the academic year and provide kind of broad foundations for study of art history. And all our MA students are invited to attend those. They're not obligatory, but they're certainly, we warmly encourage you to attend those because they again help to situate your particular special option, your particular field within a kind of a broader discourse of art history. But we also have a very active research forum, which is to say that pretty much every night at the Courtauld, there is some kind of lecture or conference taking place, which brings together typically external speakers from other universities across the UK or beyond, or occasionally curators or artists, um, uh, and gives them a platform to speak about their work, for people to ask questions. These researcher events are a really valuable moment, I think, for you as students to encounter other students and curators and scholars from across London and beyond who come to attend these research events, to hear the kinds of questions that they're asking, to chat to them over drinks after those events, and in short, to feel part of a kind of a broader research community. And again, I think that there's this is one of the advantages of being a member of a relatively large institute solely dedicated to art history, curation, and conservation, in that we have this kind of critical mass of events taking place and scholars and students who are really engaging with that. One further opportunity that we offer our MA students is our painting pairs program. The Courtauld has a department of conservation focused particularly on the conservation of wall paintings and easel paintings and Buddhist art. And our painting pair program offers our MA History of Art students the opportunity to pair up with some of our conservation students in the study of the easel paintings that they are conserving. It's a small and quite demanding program in some ways, and only a small number of students are selected to do it each year. But those that do have found it to be an incredibly valuable experience. The History of Art students learn a lot from the conservation students. Conservation students learn a lot from the History of Art students. And occasionally those projects have gone on to lead to research or indeed to exhibitions. And that's the case with the painting that I'm showing you on the left here, Wyndham Lewis. painting that was conserved by one of our conservation of easel painting students. And through their research they did with one of our MA students, they discovered, thanks to some infrared and X-ray analysis, another painting hidden beneath that by the artist Helen Saunders, which was completely unknown and which formed the basis for an exhibition subsequent to that. Um, and then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about where the MA can take you. And the answer to that is in all sorts of directions. It's true, I think, to say that it's difficult to find a major museum or gallery in the UK or North America that hasn't got at least one staff member who at some point has done the MA at the Courtauld, and a number of our MA graduates have gone on to very distinguished positions in museums and galleries or other roles in the art world. And you can see a few of them here. It's also true, however, that a lot of our MA students go on to other careers in marketing, in finance, in journalism, publishing, and so forth. What the MA provides, we hope, is a really rigorous, in-depth engagement with both written culture, the ability to read and interrogate vast amounts of written and scholarly work, opportunities to really hone your writing and your thinking and your ability to present work and argue, but also distinctively the opportunity to understand and engage and talk about visual materials in a world that's so dependent on the visual. So this is a program that we hope and has been shown to be a kind of a useful launchpad for careers in the arts, broadly conceived, but also we think provides a really rigorous training for other kinds of careers. So that gives you a very brief outline to the MA. I can see there are a few questions coming in, and we will try to answer those towards the end of the session. But I'm going to pass over now to my colleague Taka, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the admissions process. So
thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm just going to talk about admissions briefly. Yeah, so my name is Taka, and I'm the admissions officer at the Courtauld. I mainly deal with postgraduate applications, and I'm a sort of person, so the first point of contact if you email us to the PG admissions email address. Okay then, if I could actually have next slide, please, Tom. Yeah, thank you. So just a quick reminder, we will start the Q&A session at the end of this talk. Please ask question by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Just to note, we have over 100 participants, so please note we may not be able to answer all questions, but we would like to try to answer as many as possible. So talking about admissions, so applications for 2024 entry are now open. Application deadline for the MA History of Art is 26th of January 2024. And you can submit your application from this link on the screen at the moment. This can be found on the MA course information page. There is a link called how to apply. It's a button. You can click that, and then you can just jump to that page. All submitted application will only be assessed after the deadline. So even if you apply now, even if you apply in January, All application will be assessed after the 26th of January. Next slide, please. So entry requirements. So UK qualifications. Students will normally have achieved a good 2-1 in their bachelor's degree, considered to be overall average 65% or above. Overseas qualifications, equivalent to a good 2-1 in the UK first degree. For example, American students should have GPA of 3.5 or above. If you're not 100% sure about international qualifications, please do email us and then we can actually let you know. Next slide, please. So personal statement, you can either make a general application for the MA History Bard, or you may indicate your preferred special options. Many applicants choose to make a general application, writing one personal statement, which they explain their interest in the MA History Bard at the Courtauld. If you do this, we will match your application to a special option with available space. If you wish to apply for individual options, you should provide statement for each special option to which you have applied. For each statement, you should detail your reasons for applying to the Courtauld, to the individual option you have chosen. As member of academic staff will only be able to see the supporting statement written for their option choice. Please note, both statements, there's a 600 word limit for each option for statement. You can apply maximum 3 individual options if you choose to. And then you sort of list in order of preferences, and then if you choose a maximum 3, we will start assessing your application from the first option to the third option. Next slide, please. Written work samples. So that's 3,000 to 5,000 word limit. We prefer a chapter from the dissertation from your most recent degree, and where possible, on art historical or historical subject. If you have not yet completed your BA dissertation, you may submit an essay of suitable length. At the start of your writing sample, please briefly indicate the content in which it was written. For example, this is the second chapter of a final year dissertation, or this was midterm essay written over a 4-week period. I get many email about the subject, sort of content of essay. You can submit your dissertation, but just please treat this as an opportunity to show off your academic writing skills and the knowledge of art history. So you can submit the topics other than art history, but you are sort of missing the opportunity to show off your knowledge. So please think it that way. And next slide, please. So academic transcript, that's quite straightforward. It's an official transcript of your previous and current qualification, detailing program, modules, subject, grades, and if completed, final grades. If you're currently studying a degree, obviously you don't actually have your final transcript just yet. If that's the case, please ask your university to issue an interim transcript. If you have been out of education for a long time and you don't have a transcript to submit, you can contact us and just let us know what you have, and we can actually just tell you what to submit. Next slide, please. Academic references. Once you submit your application, automated reference requests will be sent to your referees. As your referees will be asked to attest your academic abilities, you should make every effort to provide 2 academic references. If this is not possible, you may use professional referees instead. They will still be expected to be able to provide an assessment of your intellectual abilities and potential to learn. As your referees may be unavailable to write the reference at the last minute, you should contact your referees well in advance of submitting your application, normally 4 to 6 weeks. Referees typically have 5 days to submit their references, and references can be submitted after the application deadline. And this means we wait about 5 days after the application deadline. But if you don't receive your references, your application will be assessed without references. So please ensure that your referees receive our emails and they just submit their references on time. Next slide, please. So other requirements, passport, ID photo. This ID photo will be used for your student ID. So please choose a good one and a recent photo if that's possible. CV, really helpful to provide insight that's not available to us through other materials such as transcript. So please submit your CV. It can be academic or it can be professional. Any information that that cannot be on your final transcript or on your essay, it can actually go on your CV, such as experiences, like sort of volunteering and stuff like that. English language requirement, if applicable. We accept IELTS and the Cambridge English test. And if you're an international student, please submit your previous UK visas as well, please. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about scholarships a little bit. So we've got 3 different types of scholarships at the Courtauld. So we've got Courtauld scholarships. Application will be opening late spring, so you don't have to actually do anything at the moment. Sorry, just a second. And we will send a notification email to everybody when applications are open. You'll receive the outcome before you have to make a decision by paying deposit in May. So average scholarship we had last year was £7,000. Courtauld scholarships are all donations, so each scholarships are very different. So the amount of scholarships do vary. So some people receive a little bit more than 7,000, some people receive a little bit less, but just on average, it's £7,000. If you're eligible, you can apply for the master's loan from the UK government. And if your application is successful, you would receive £12,167 towards your tuition fees or living expenses. This funding will be paid directly into your bank account, so you can choose how to use that funding. And we've also got something called hardship fund, and this is for enrolled students. So after your enrollment, if you got any hardship and experienced any sort of difficulties financially, we can provide an award up to £1,000. Normally financial support is in the £400 to £600 range. The hardship fund is limited, so once all the funds have been allocated to students, the hardship fund would close for the academic year. And this fund cannot be used for tuition fees payment. Next slide, please. So accommodations. So we've got accommodations for postgraduate students. Applications will open in late spring. Normally around sort of March, sort of April, that sort of time. At the moment, we don't have sort of confirmed places from University of London, but we traditionally have rooms in intercollegiate halls, and we have about 5 different halls in central London area, and that's shared by other University of London students. And so it is actually quite good to mingle and with students from all over the different universities. And these rooms are mainly for international students who have never studied in the UK before. But if you are based in the UK and if you'd like to apply, you're more than welcome to make an application. Next slide, please. So any question, please contact pgadmissions@courtauld.ac.uk. And that inbox is checked by me, so I should be able to answer any questions that you would like to ask. All information that I talked about today that is available on our website. If you search postgraduate application guidance, that page should come up, and there's a link on the screen at the moment. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, Taka. I'm going to stop my share now and pass over to Aishu, who's going to give you a little bit of a student's eye view of the MA before we move to the questions and answers. So over to you, Aishu.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. So I joined the Courtauld in October, and my kind of route to art history has been a bit circuitous. So I started out with economics, and then at LSE, and then I did a master's at Oxford, and then I worked in India for several years before doing a PG dip in art history at SOAS, and then I kind of found myself at the Courtauld this year. And it's been a really great journey so far. I think it's what I've enjoyed the most is the kind of space that you get to really critically engage with actually a lot of new material that you've never encountered before, and you kind of are really encouraged to form your own opinions about it and to kind of look at things from different angles, and kind of synthesize your own argument and your own view. And it's really great that it's such a diverse environment where you have people who come from very different backgrounds, who've studied different things, and it does kind of add to that sort of that richness of perspective. And he spent a few hours just listening to so many different ways of looking at things, which is very exciting. And so I do one of the medieval options. I study with Tom. And so our usual weeks are a mix of lectures and seminars. And so we're kind of encouraged to kind of join the undergrads with the foundations lectures as well, which are really great because they give you a broad overview of sort of canonical aspects of art history. And I do try to go to those every week. And they're riveting. And seminars are more sort of discussion based. So you sort of you arrive with the readings from that week, and sort of if you have any questions, we kind of discuss them, kind of share views with the things we've encountered. And it's also time for presentations and so on. So so it's kind of like a good mix of lectures and kind of thinking about things in a more creative way. And I think it's also great that we kind of get to kind of leave the Courtauld as well and kind of look at things in situ. We recently went to Senate House and we saw a facsimile of the Cantigas. And it's one thing seeing it on a screen and something else when you're up close, and nothing quite beats that. So and we are going to Spain next week, which I'm very much looking forward to. So it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to seeing the next couple of months unfold. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding. And I'm glad I joined. So any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Aishu. So I hope that gives you a kind of flavor of the MA. We have a little bit of time now for some questions and answers. There's a lot of them, and so I apologize if I don't get through all the questions, but I think I will generally try to answer them, but in some cases might defer to Tucker or to Aishu. So I can see the first question we have is about grant for trips. Do we get grant trips? And the answer is yes. The Courtauld provides a grant for overseas trips and also a grant for UK trips. And the idea is that those grants should cover your expenses in terms of travel and accommodation, and kind of museum and entry and so on for those trips. So yes, there are grants for those. There's a question about how many people on average apply for the MA in art history, and the answer varies from year to year, but I would say that usually we have about kind of 500 applications or so per year. There's a question, if you are in a special option, is your course leader automatically your advisor for your dissertation? In almost all cases, yes. Your special options tutor is a person that you'll get to know most. They'll have the research expertise in the particular area that you're writing about, and they will give you guidance on that. It's theoretically possible to choose another topic, but generally we don't advise that you choose a topic kind of that's miles and miles away from your special option material, simply because then you don't have the opportunity to kind of use the toolkit and the skills and knowledge that you've acquired during that special option. Let me move down. So this relates to a question about how much guidance students receive from their supervisor on their MA dissertation. So as I may have mentioned, typically you would have one kind of class discussion where you would discuss possible topics collectively with your fellow students. That's a useful exercise, I think, in just kind of understanding what you're doing or how it relates to what others in your special option are doing. But then you would have 3 tutorials in addition to that. So typically a first tutorial before the Easter break, where you'll discuss the kind of key questions that you want to address. You'll discuss key bibliography and things that you need to try and read, get hold of. If you need to make any trips to archives or to see your objects, you might discuss that so you can go over the Easter vacation. And then you have another tutorial early in the summer to just kind of check on your progress, see if you've got any kind of problems or issues that your special options tutor can help you with. And then normally kind of about 10 days before the deadline, you'll have a final tutorial with your special options tutor where they'll give you feedback on a draft that you submit. And it's an opportunity for you to really kind of finesse and finalize the dissertation. So it's pretty closely supervised. I think it's probably unusual to find such a close level supervision, but I think that's one of the aspects of the MA that helps to produce work at the really highest quality. So we have some more questions about the general application versus the applying for specific special options. This is a new thing that we've introduced this year. And we've introduced it partly because in some cases we found that students, their overwhelming preferences to study for an MA in history of art at the Courtauld without a kind of strong preference in terms of the particular subject matter, but also because of the fact that some of our special options are very heavily oversubscribed. And so by making the general application, you can either choose to make the general application or to indicate your preferences. But by making the general application, we're able to direct you towards special options that match your particular interests, but that also are more likely to have space available to you. If you instead choose to submit your preferences, that's kind of up to you, and that's certainly an option that some of our students take. If you're not accepted onto any of those special options, then your application will be entered into clearing, where there's an opportunity for it to be picked up by other special options tutors with spaces on their courses. So I hope that answers that question. How common is it for people to apply straight out of university versus after time out of university? We have a real mixture. Some people come to us straight from a BA or from a diploma program. A lot of students have taken a year out or longer for work and so on. So I think I don't know what the divide would be, but I should think it's about maybe a kind of a 60-40 split, with 60% coming straight from an undergraduate degree or some other kind of degree. Some more questions about the application process here. Can you submit 2 essays to make up the word count for your written sample? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. What we really want to see is your best work. Again, if they're too short essays, if you can just provide a little bit of explanation when you submit those kind of at the start of the essay, just to say, this was a kind of a short essay I wrote as part of a course on whatever it was. I think you want to choose really the work. Yes, if you have something on an art historical topic that you can submit, that's very helpful. But really, we want to see the highest quality work. And if, for instance, you have a kind of old art history essay that you weren't so pleased with, and a kind of newer essay that you've written for history or English degree or something similar, and you felt that was stronger, we would rather see your strongest work. We want to see your ability to kind of make an argument and to write well. So that's what I would prioritize. There's a question, Tucker, that maybe you could answer. Person writes, I'd like to know if I've never studied in the UK nor hold a student visa, what should I submit for the previous visas?
So that section is optional, so you don't if you haven't actually held any UK visas before, you don't have to submit anything.
Thank you. Another person asked, is there an option to be a research assistant or teaching assistant to help fund our studies? No, we don't offer teaching roles to our MA students. It's quite rare that there are research assistant roles as well. There are quite often a number of employment options available at the Courtauld. A lot of our students help out, for instance, with our research forum events. Some of our students also work alongside the MA, although I would say it is an intensive course, and it's hard to do that, certainly more than 1 or 2 days a week, certainly doing the kind of talk component of the course. But that option is available to you. I should also add, something I didn't mention in my presentation, is that with our gallery also, students have the opportunity to give student talks in there, so to take members of the public around the gallery and speak to particular objects and collections, and that's an opportunity I think that can be really useful for students. A few questions about language classes. So you may be aware that the Courtauld recently kind of made a collaboration with King's College London, who are neighbours at Somerset House. And that means that all our students have access to the very wide variety of language courses provided by KCL at a discounted rate. Language courses don't form part of the MA, and they're not assessed in any way, but there are opportunities for students to attend those language courses at a discounted rate. I would also say that on many of our special options, you'll be dealing with material from around the world, and potentially materials in different languages. We don't have a requirement for students to have languages other than English, but it's certainly true that if you do have other languages, your tutors will be able to direct you to a wider body of scholarship and bibliography, and that will help you with your research. So it's not a key component, but we're certainly very keen on students with interests in language. So we're not going to get through all these questions, I think, but I might pass one of these questions on to you, Aishu. It's a few questions about the kind of volume of work, both in terms of contact hours, but also in terms of the kind of preparation and how kind of busy you are. And perhaps you can answer that better than I can.
Yeah, so I think it tends to vary from week to week, and it also depends on which aspects you want to research further and focus on for your assessed essay. So, for example, if it's an architectural topic, I'm interested in it, so I would spend more than sort of a few hours reading about it. But in general, it's maybe 3 to 4 hours a week of essential reading, and then above and beyond that, it's kind of up to you. And so I think it's very manageable. But yeah, so it depends on you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that generally we encourage students to think about the MA like a kind of a working week. That you make the most out of your seminars and your classes by being really well prepared for them. And but as you said, there's quite a lot that rests on kind of your rest on your shoulders in terms of how much reading preparation you want to do, how much time you need to give for writing and researching essays. But I think that certainly the experience of most of our MA students is that they're pretty busy all the time. Certainly. Let's see. So the question about internship or experiences with museums during the MA, does the Courtauld offer help with these? So the answer is no, we don't have any kind of formal system. Gallery internships are extremely competitive in London museums and galleries, and it would just not be possible for us to place all 230 students. Having said that, we do have very close connections with a lot of curators and galleries. And although it's quite unusual for students to have time to do kind of placements during the course of MA studies, there are instances where, for instance, you might be working for an assessed essay or for a dissertation on a particular object that might be not on display in a particular collection or museum, and often we can kind of help put you in contact with curators who might be able to show you those objects and talk about them with you. And in many cases, our MA students have gone on to work with particular museums or galleries in some capacity. So there's no formal structure for that, but there are, I would say, opportunities to develop those links, particularly in relation to the kind of research you're doing for assessed essays and dissertations. There are few questions about applications for people who've been out of education for a while or haven't done art history, particularly in relation to references and written work. What I would say as to written samples is if you don't feel you've got anything relevant, you haven't written an essay for a decade or something, or not on an art historical subject, then the one thing that we would encourage you to do is go and visit an exhibition or a pamphlet display and write something like a kind of review or write a response to that, maybe that focuses on one or two artworks and thinks about them in relation to those exhibitions more broadly. What we really want to see is your ability to kind of engage with artworks, engage with the ideas behind the exhibitions, and to look closely. But so in that case, you might need to write a fresh piece of work. But in most cases, applicants are usually able to find some piece of written work that gives evidence of their kind of writing capacity. We're coming to the end of our session here, and I think we're not going to have a chance to answer all these questions individually. I think we can continue maybe for a few more minutes, but if you don't, if you haven't had a kind of answer to your question, I apologize, we've not had time for that, but do send any questions through to our admissions team, pgadmissions@courtauld.ac.uk, and we can try to answer those for you. It's great to see all these questions, and we can sort of do our best to answer them, but there's just too many for today. But let's see if there are some that we haven't kind of on particular themes that we haven't really touched on. There are quite a lot of questions about references and who is best to write a reference for you. If you have been in education in the last 10 years or so, and you can get a reference from somebody who taught you or kind of personal tutor or something, then that would be the best kind of reference. But obviously not everyone will have that. So if you can get some kind of professional reference, then that is also helpful. So it may be that you're coming from a kind of completely different career background, in which case that's fine. At the very least, a reference who can attest to your kind of engagement with materials, your preparation for whatever career you were in, your ability to write in particular is useful, and to kind of or present works. Our MA students do come from a wide variety of backgrounds, and that makes for very interesting seminar discussions, as Aishu hinted at. If you absolutely can't think of a reference to make sure to get short of your mum or something, then just maybe write a brief explanation about why that is. In some cases, like that, you might be invited to an interview or something, so that your potential special option tutor can speak to you about that. But generally, we find that applicants are able to find a referee one way or another. So references, I should say that the request for references will come the moment you submit your application. So if you want, I mean, what we would generally recommend is that you get in contact with your referees in advance of submitting your application, or certainly well in advance of the 26th of January deadline. Check that they're willing to do it, and maybe kind of so they can kind of start writing it or whatever. But you can also, they will get an automatic reference request the moment you press submit on your application. So if you're keen to give them kind of longer from that moment until the final deadline for references, then we'd recommend that you submit your application earlier. You don't have to wait to the 26th of January by any means. And we'd be, in fact, it's very helpful for us if you submit earlier. So do consider that. A few other questions about kind of contact hours and how often people are on campus. Again, I would say that it varies a lot. So, for example, around essay deadlines, typically we would try to lessen the number of teaching hours so that you can focus on finishing off your essays. At other times in the semester, it'd be much more intensive. So at the beginning of this semester, for instance, Aishu and my other students were working on a whole series of presentations for seminars, reading and preparation for those seminars, but also kind of short essays as well, in order to get some practice and to get some feedback from me. So it's very difficult to give you a kind of a sense of an average week. But what I would say is, particularly if you're attending research forum events and the foundations lectures, which is something that we would strongly encourage you to do, I would say students typically are in probably 4 days a week. It might be that on the 5th day they're, and particularly when they're researching their dissertation, they're working elsewhere in other libraries, places like the British Library or the Warburg Institute. But as I said earlier, broadly speaking, we encourage you to think about this like a kind of a working week, and that you're working and preparing for seminars in the kind of equivalent amount of time as you would in a working week. So I think that we're going to have to bring that to an end. If you missed any of these answers or in the discussion, this session has been recorded and will go up on our website very soon. But if your question hasn't been answered, please do get in touch with our admissions team and we can try and answer any questions. It's been a pleasure chatting to you about this, and I hope that I might see you either at one of our offer holder days in the future or in the beginning of the new academic year. In the meanwhile, thank you very much, Tucker and Aishu, and do get in touch if you have further questions. Thank you.